Hello everybody and welcome to our Vitality series. This week we are discussing all things performing under pressure. My name is Danson Bennett. I am a former England and Great Britain hockey player and I am so delighted to be hosting a fabulous guest today. Today we have Stoney Mbe. Casey was a retired international footballer. She has 130 England caps and 6 goals. I'm pretty impressed with that, given Casey is a defender. You made your debut, Casey, against France in 2000 and went on to enjoy a career spanning 2 decades. A squad member in the UEFA Women's Euro 2005 and an integral member of the England team to reach the UEFA Euro 2009 finals and the quarterfinals of the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2007 and 2011. But that's not it. In 2012, Casey became the England captain and famously the GB captain at that fabulous 2012 Olympic Games. Casey retired from international football and joined the coaching team with the Lionesses before managing Manchester United and have recently been appointed as the head coach for the National Women's Soccer League expansion team, San Diego. Casey, welcome.
Here we go.
Do we have Casey there?
One thing I'm not good at is technology.
Here we are, Casey. I mean, what a resume. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm absolutely delighted to have you with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on, especially during this time. It brings back lots of memories, that's for sure.
It doesn't, absolutely. And for anyone tuning in today, thank you so much for joining us. As we go through the next 45 minutes to an hour, please feel free to send in any questions you may have for Casey. I will do my absolute best to give any of those over, and I know we'll get some fabulous replies. So we're in the middle of an Olympic Games, a 1-year postponement. I'm sure many of you have just tuned into that fabulous Great Britain football game against Australia. Casey, I don't think I can start anywhere else. Obviously, the absolute devastation of 2-1 up with 5 minutes left to go, goal scored. We go into extra time, 2 goals are scored against Australia with that desperately disappointing missed penalty. Casey, just quickly, can you give us an oversight into that game, how the players will be feeling? I know you've been there before yourself.
Yeah, listen, even sitting at home, I was devastated. I had tears in my eyes for them sitting here because I know that feeling all too well. And I think going into the game, we were probably favourites in terms of the form. Australia hadn't really hit the ground running that much in the tournament. So to go 2-1 up with such a short space of time in the game, to then get hit again, you have to almost come back emotionally each time because you think, right, we're nearly there. Okay, we've got extra time. Then you get a penalty. And it's difficult because you almost think you're going to score in those moments. And it wasn't a well-executed penalty, and that'll be one that Caroline Weir, takes with her for a long time. Unfortunately, it's not her fault. You have to have the courage to step up. I do believe that. Then they go down the other end, they get a third, they get a fourth. And we come back, we fight again, we get the third. And for Ellen White, it's not often you score a hat-trick in a major tournament. To then be knocked out, it's absolutely devastating. They'll be in that dressing room and they'll be looking at themselves. They'll know the opportunity missed as well. And that was the thing for me always in major tournaments was the legacy piece, because going into those tournaments, the platform and the visibility it gives the game, that if you can be successful and you can medal and you can bring something back, the impact it has on your game long term is huge. And I know they went over there with determined belief to medal. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. So they will be absolutely devastated. They really will.
Yeah, so interesting. Thank you, Casey. I'm sure I can speak for absolutely everybody listening when I was literally on the edge of my seat. And, I really want to spin a positive into this because they absolutely have inspired yet again, probably another generation of young footballers coming through. Today is all about pressure. And I was looking at the individuals on that team and you've mentioned the name, but Ellen White, 7 goals were scored, 6 of them were from her. There's an enormous amount of pressure on her shoulders. There must be going into game in, game out. You're obviously now a manager. How do you deal with an athlete, because this is so interesting to know when they're on the top of their game? We always say, how do you deal with an athlete when they're not on the top of the game? But actually, when you've got someone playing so well, how do you maintain that as a manager? How do you keep them in that form?
Feed them everything they need. Feed them positivity, feed them finishing in the back of an empty net if they need it, feed them finishing against an opponent that gives them different tasks. Keep that energy level high, celebrate their successes, make sure everybody else knows their successes too, so you can keep them on a high. And they'll know that everybody contributes to their success. They don't score without a cross or a pass. You know, strikers have that instinct, and she's been unbelievable. And let's not take away, she's come back from several ACLs, you know, huge, major injuries on her back. And she's come back and performed like that. And it's a lot of pressure because she's probably the only leading striker in that team as well. And that makes it difficult. But she's performed. I think it helps when you score 2 goals in the first game of the tournament, because it kind of relieves that pressure straight away, and then you're playing with a bit more freedom. And she's been fantastic. I think if anybody deserved to go through today, it was definitely her.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And this Olympics has given us so much in terms of players and athletes that have performed, players and athletes that have just missed out. You look at Jane Jones and the devastation, Simone Biles, and what an incredible amount these athletes have done to show to everybody that we are all human. We are all human. Pressure is there for everyone in every different form. And sometimes in the absolute heat of battle, it can be something that we just have to acknowledge, and that is okay. So I'm absolutely delighted as we delve into this, we try to unlock some of the ways in which you dealt with it, Casey, as both a player, as also a manager, but also a human being as well. So on that, I'm going to take you back, if I may, Casey, to the start of your career. Now, I'd really like to understand, you know, why was it football? What was it that got you into the game? What was it in those early years that made you stay on that path towards the incredible career that you had?
Well, we both know, Alex, that your career never goes like this. It's very much an up and down, and that started from the off for me. Don't even know where to begin. I always say the game found me. I didn't find the game, because I lived in a cul-de-sac in Essex, jumpers down for goals. Boys always picked me in their team, never stuck me in goal, so I knew that I was okay. And I loved it. But there was no girls' teams where I grew up at all, not one single team. There was a boys' team in the town. I wasn't allowed to play because I was a girl, and girls were perceived not to play football back then. You know, I'm not ancient, but it just wasn't done. So I just played in the street. And that's kind of where I honed my skills for a long time, until we moved. My mum and dad got divorced, and we moved. My dad stayed where he was, and we moved to London, because that's where my mum's kind of family is, support network, and where she could get more opportunities to work. She didn't have a lot of money growing up, and she came home one day and she was like, "I found a team for you to play for." I'm like, "Okay, brilliant." And it was actually a boys' team. So my first ever team was a boys' team. She didn't tell me until I walked in the sports hall at the local school where we trained. And for the first 45 minutes, I've got to be honest, of the session, I didn't touch the ball. They wouldn't pass to me, they wouldn't talk to me. I was an alien to them in the football world. And I'm quite stubborn, so I decided that I would do something about it. I had a choice. I could go home and not come back in, or I could do something about it. So I waited till the biggest lad got the ball, and I smashed him up against the wall, nicked the ball, and then they always like, "Oh, this girl can play." And then I played for the boys' team for the whole season, absolutely loved it, scored loads of goals. I used to be a centre forward then, till I realised I had no pace. And then at the end of the season, even now it's an accolade for me, I won their Players' Player of the Season, and that meant I earned their respect, which was huge for me. Unfortunately, I'd now reached the age of 11 where you were banned from playing for mixed sport. So every form of football, 5-a-side at school, 11-a-side at school, the team I played for, I was banned from playing, which was a difficult time, because I didn't understand it. Sport was sport to me, and I loved it. Chance happened that a little league started around the corner from my house, a girls one, meant I could go and play there. Was it the challenge that I needed at the time? Probably not. I scored 108 goals in one season, so it tells you the kind of level I was playing at. But
I missed that on your bio.
But I think things happen for a reason. And when I was playing, one morning a guy was walking his dog around the park, and he stopped and he started talking to all the parents and made a beeline for my mum, and he was the Chelsea ladies manager. So at 12 years old, off I hopped to Chelsea ladies, not knowing there was no junior section. So at 12 years old, I was thrown in with the first team and the reserve team. Everyone was kind of 8 to 10 years older than me. I wasn't actually legally allowed to play until I was 14. So we used to change the date of birth on my registration forms, and reason I was quite tall, so it was okay. Played for them, broke into the first team within a couple of games. Absolutely loved it there. And also it had pros and cons too, because as daunted as I was turning up, I'm a kind of, you got to get in and you got to get involved, can do it attitude, even if it terrifies me at times. And the bonus was, like, my mum worked 3 jobs a day, pretty much every day. She used to go out and clean other people's houses in the morning. During the day, she worked in a betting shop, and she did a shift at pubs in the nighttime. So getting to and from things was quite difficult. But because I played for a senior team, the girls could actually pick me up. And if they didn't take me, my manager did. So I had an awful lot of support. And bearing in mind, Chelsea was a grassroots football club, I had to pay to play. And the manager even made sure that I only paid 50% subs because we couldn't afford the whole amount for the kit and stuff. So it was the same manager, Tony Farmer, who I still talk to now, I think's had a big impact on changing my life. Took me for my first England trial when I was 14, 15. It was actually at Bisham Abbey. And there was kind of loads of girls, 14, 15, about 56 of us, all played games all day. I've got to be honest, I probably didn't for 1 minute think I should be there. And I probably trained like that as well. So when they wrote to me, I took the letter, and it said, sorry, you're not good enough. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't really know what to do now with my career, because that's my dream, really, is to play for England. But you're now telling me I'm not good enough. And I'll be really open, my home life wasn't great. I didn't grow up in a great environment. My mum's boyfriend was an alcoholic at the time. So football for me was a safe place where I could go and I could just be myself. I was okay at school. So then I was like, right, what am I going to do? And I remember it was about 2 months later, I got a letter for a second trial. And I remember them kind of thinking, do you know what, I'm not sure I want to go back, because no one likes rejection. No one likes being told they're not good enough. And I remember thinking, no, sod that, sleeves up. I'll show them with their clipboards that I'm good enough. And I thought, do you know what, if I go back and I believe in myself, I try my hardest and I just give everything, then I can't look back with any regrets, even if I fail. And it went from there, really. I got into a successful campaign. I got into the England under-16s. Within 2 camps, I'd moved up to the under-18s, where we played a tournament here. Off the back of that, Hope Power, who's the manager, made me into the seniors. I made my senior debut at 17, and I went on to play for England many times, but also faced so many setbacks during those times that I believe made me better.
I mean, Casey, there is just so much in there that I've already gathered. I just absolutely love that, you either stick at it or you go home. There are so many similarities listening to you to my story, and I just love how much has changed now. I too played in a boys team for the first few years of my career because I couldn't find a girls hockey team nearby. Not until it was under 17 level. And I was 10, I wanted to play. It's just so amazing now how much has changed, how much opportunity there is. Really interesting, Casey. You mentioned your coach, and actually listening in, if I've learned anything from the Olympics, from my career, certainly from listening to you, it's having a team of people around you, building your team, knowing who your team are. And I'm really interested. You obviously had a very good one in challenging circumstances at times. Did you have role models? Were there people that you looked up to? How important is that now for our young people? Hey, forget just young people. As an adult now, I still look up to people and need those people in my life. What are your thoughts on that?
I think role models are really important. I think they have such a responsibility in your life. I didn't have any footballing ones that were female because I couldn't see it. Couldn't see it in the papers, couldn't see it on the TV. Lots of male ones. Ian Wright was a big favourite of mine because he always played with a smile on his face. He made the game look fun. And that's why you always pick up, you picked up a hockey stick, I picked up a ball because it was fun. And I think your family, I think your parents, it starts at home for me, in terms of my parents not pushing me, encouraging me. And they weren't pushy parents, they were supportive. If you want to do it, but they wouldn't let me quit if it got tough. They didn't believe in that. And I thought my parents were very different in their ways of support, but they were role models. And now in the coaching world, absolutely, even more so, because I thought as a player I wanted my own identity, and as a coach I want my own identity, but I know 1% of the game as a coach, so I want to learn so much more. So you look at never copy, because I think you have to be authentic and I have to be myself, and I want to fail. If I fail my way. I don't want to fail somebody else's way, and it wouldn't be me if I did that, and I'd fail anyway. So I look and I observe and I take the best bits. And I also did that in my career as a player. I learned in situations when maybe I was hard done to, and I thought, how would I have managed that differently? I found out I was losing the England captaincy watching a TV show whilst I was sat at home, and I thought to myself, how would I have dealt with that in a different way? I would have dealt with it very differently. And I'm huge on relationships, because it doesn't matter whether you play hockey, whether you're a banker, whether you're in football. It's the relationships you have with people. It's the relationship you build to be able to have a difficult conversation, to be able to trust them, to be honest with them, to know what their motivations are. if you don't want to invest in relationships, you can't be in management, in my opinion. Or you can, but I don't think you'll be as successful as you could be.
I mean, I couldn't agree anymore. I'm sure, Casey, everybody listening will probably disagree that you know significantly more than 1% as a coach, but it's so refreshing to hear your mindset in terms of learning. What an incredible thing for us all to hear. You're at the top of the game in one of the highest positions within your industry, and you still openly talk around there is always more to learn, and that's the most fabulous thing about sport. Casey, I know you've touched on this, and there was also obviously an enormous amount of pressure on you as a young person, whether that be trying to find a girls' team, whether that be the pressures of your mum working 3 jobs, or trying to move forward in a sport that's very, very male dominated. These days on young people, there is enormous amounts of pressure, whether it be education, social media, football. Now, whilst we're in that space, how did you deal with that as a young person? What advice would you give to somebody listening who potentially their children are going through, those sorts of pressures at the moment?
I think I'm blessed as a young person that social media didn't exist. And I do genuinely feel blessed. I think it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it, in terms of how much access you have to stuff, also how much people can say to you now and what you can see and what the picture of perfect looks like and stuff like that. I think enormous pressure. I've got 3 young children now. I've got 2 little girls, got a little boy, and it terrifies me, if I'm really honest. So as a young person, escapism was good for me in terms of just investing myself into my sport. But also I always had a job because we were never full-time professionals. And kind of looking at, like, if you had a 4-legged stool, if you were a footballer, and this happens with the male players, they just have football, concentrate on football, marry early, concentrate on football. Well, if anything goes wrong with that, your store you've got nothing to fall back on. Your store falls over. Whereas I had different elements to that. I had a job. I started coaching when I was 16, did my level 2, worked full-time in lots of different jobs. I've worked in McDonald's, I've worked in betting shops, I've been a coach, I've worked at a Beckham Academy. I've had numerous jobs which helped me work with people, transferable skills from sport to life. And when football maybe wasn't good, I got up and I went to work in the morning, and I had perspective. When my life wasn't good, I could put myself into football. So I had a good balance, and also having interests maybe outside of the game. I think it's so important that you have a balance, because otherwise the pressure can just feel like it's coming inwards and inwards and inwards. And if you have one focus and one focus only, where do you go when that gets too much? How do you let the pressure off? So I did a lot of work on kind of just understanding me and my needs. How do I have fun? How do I laugh? Where do I go to let off steam? And actually football for me was a release a lot of the time, but then I needed something else. So I think also being aware that actually just turning your phone off sometimes is really healthy. Not looking at it, not having time on it, just spending time talking to people, having a laugh with people, and not losing conversation, because the amount of times I've walked away from a conversation, we've had a good laugh, and I just feel 10 times better than I did before I started that conversation, because I've been able to have fun and have a laugh with someone. And scientifically proven that laughing is good for you. So the more we do that, the better, in my opinion. But I think the more you understand, you don't understand yourself when you're young. There are pressures to be certain things, to look a certain way. Like even the reality TV shows, I'm like, please, this cannot be. When we did the athlete mentor stuff, and you're going into schools, and that is young people's aspirations, to go on those shows. And I'm like, to be what? What? To be what? Just famous, but for what? Like, what are you going to stand for? And I always said to myself, like, how do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered for the impact I have on people in a positive way. And I always tried really hard to be the best I could be in whatever I did. But I don't think there's an easy way. But as a parent, I will massively educate my children on the downside. And I do it with my players. I'm like, if you're going to read it on your good day, you better be ready to read it on your bad day. If not, just leave it alone, because a lot of it's nonsense.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything you said there, Casey, and what a lovely piece of advice in terms of balance. Balance is so key for our young people. Education around the pitfalls, the good bits, dealing with all the pressures that there are. It's an absolute minefield, but I absolutely love that idea of experience and perspective. Definitely one that we can all take on board. Casey, moving forward in your career, you had an enormous amount of international success. So, Casey, the player, I'm absolutely fascinated when I was reading about your career. How does one perform 130 times for England. You were the captain of your country. You, as you said yourself, you had some ups and some downs, but can you just give us an insight into what you believe led you to that success?
Well, I was in the England setup for 18 years, which is a hell of a long time. I always say it's hard to get to the top. It's even harder to stay there. And I'll tell you what got me there. I wasn't the best. And that's what drove me. I was never the best in any of my teams, but I had an ambition to make the most of what I had. So when Hope Howe left me out in 2005 and we had a home Euros, I was in the squad, but I didn't play a minute. By the time I got home, I'm already rolling my sleeves up. Then I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm going training for everybody else. I'm doing a 4 days work. I'm getting there before. I was like, what can I control? I can be the fittest player in the team. I can learn the game better than anybody else. And I can refine my skills to the best of my ability. What's in my control? Okay, that's the bit. So I went from not playing in 2005 to playing every single minute in 2007, winning International Player of the Year, becoming England captain for the same manager that didn't think I was good enough 2 years previous. So it's amazing how your luck can turn when you decide to work hard. But that had to be my choice. It wasn't just going to come. It was hard work. There was a lot of doubt throughout my career. You know, you have that self-doubt. Of course you do. I remember walking up the steps in 2007 to the World Cup, first World Cup game against Japan, and thinking, what am I doing here? You know, thinking, but then you just work hard. My method, right, okay, next, work hard, just keep going, because I was like, do you know what? If I don't, the person who wants my shirt is going to take it, or the person I'm playing against is going to be better than me. And that can't happen because of I decided not to get out of bed that morning. And I do think that comes from you. That can't come from coaches. That can't come from parents. That has to be a hunger inside yourself to want to do that. I think obviously when I lost the captaincy, I was more senior. Obviously I was very upset with the way it was handled. But I decided in that moment that manager wasn't going to end my career. I'd worked too hard to get to that place. So what I decided to do, I knew that maybe I wasn't going to play as much because I was the ex-manager's captain and he wanted to change things up. So another thing I control, how do I make myself so valuable to this team that even when I don't play, you still pick me? And I could still contribute. Even if I didn't play, I could still contribute in training. I can push you to the very edge. I can contribute in meetings. I can be a leader without having an armband, so that no matter what, I'm one of your first names on your squad list because you need me in that squad because I can help everybody. And if we do win a medal, then I know that even if I didn't step a foot on the pitch, I've played a tiny, tiny part in this team to help us succeed. And it was just a shift in mentality. And that isn't easy. It took me a lot of heartache to get over that and to build a bridge with that manager, which I stepped forward to do because I knew that it was important, and to make myself valuable to the team. So the team I came very much more about the team than me, but also I look back now and it started my managerial career in a way, in terms of that leadership, being in the leadership group, learning about people, how to manage manager between player. And I ended up being in the tactical meetings with the manager. So for me, it was a great learning experience. Had I walked away and just sulked, I wouldn't have got any of that.
Casey, it's, I keep needing to remind myself that I'm asking the questions because I'm writing down so many notes because there is so much thing. It's so clear from listening to you that actually the way you deal with pressure, the way you dealt with the really tough times in your career was, for one, it was mind over matter with your mindset. We have a choice. I think your exact words were, you either stick it or and give up and go home, or you carry on with it. It's incredible to hear. I'm really interested, Casey, you fitted so much into your career in terms of playing, so your professional playing career. I know I worked with you for many years with the Youth Sport Trust as an athlete mentor. You've said yourself you had several jobs. Now in your career you have a family. How, with the pressures that we now have in the world, with being a family member, being, for you, an athlete or a manager, for having a job on the same time, how do you fit that in? For anyone listening in, how do we cope with being pulled in a million directions?
You have to accept that sometimes you're going to get some things wrong, and that you're not going to be able to be everything to everyone. My first year at Man United, I probably wasn't a good partner or mum because I was building an entire team and dedicating my entire life to that. So balance sometimes can swing. But during these times when I've been out of work for a little while, I try and balance it back towards my family. And what I do is I try and have rules now. And I had to learn that after the first 2 years in the job, was like, right, I'm home by this time. When I'm home, I turn the phone off, because otherwise you're just contactable, email, phone, and you don't, as a head coach, it's very difficult to switch off. You know, I'd be lying if I say you do, but there's ways you can force yourself to have that quality time with your family, and make sure that you're present, because you can be there but you're not present. And I think that's the important. You can't get that time back. So I think it's knowing yourself, it's putting strategies in place to be able to do that, but also accepting that sometimes you're going to mess up, and giving permission to people around you to tell you when you are. You know, if you are out of kilter and your balance isn't right, then I give my partner permission to say, well, hold on a minute, this isn't what we've agreed. Or at work, giving my staff permission to say, go home, we don't need you. But also setting an example to my staff, because it's easy to get in at 6 in the morning and leave at 7 at night. It's hard sometimes to leave at 1 o'clock and set an example and say, no, come on, we're going. Because if you do it as the boss, then everybody else knows that it's okay to do that. So I think it's, you learn as you go. And in the next job, I'm hoping I'll start in a different way with a lot more balance. And then also knowing what staff you need around you to be able to give you that balance is really important.
Casey, thank you for being so honest. It's really raw, and it's incredible to hear you be honest about the times that you've done it well and the times where you found it difficult. But I love the piece around strategies. You know, have some rules, set some rules. I think that's so key for us all, particularly, you know, working at home now. You know, your workspace is also your lounge. Your lounge is also your workspace. Your family are around. If we can all, I think, take a little bit of that into our lives now, I think we'll all be in a much better place. Casey, we're going to move on. You've alluded to your role as captain. Now, I mean, please correct me, but I imagine one of the proudest moments of your career would be leading your team out to a 2012 Olympic Games as captain in front of thousands and thousands of pretty much every single one being a Great Britain fan. Can you just give us an insight? Because again, people listening in will be, well, we're all leaders in one capacity. How did you deal with the additional, well, of course, pressures, the additional responsibilities, potentially the conversations and relationships with the players, at what was probably the biggest moment in your career?
I think the interesting point was when I got the England captaincy, when the manager phoned me. I will never forget, she said, you've got thick enough skin for it. And I remember thinking, oh, this is meant to be a privilege. And then I got in the role and I realised that, you know, it can be dog eat dog, especially in a women's environment sometimes, especially if it's competitive. I think what I tried to do was always listen more than I spoke, to try and take everybody's opinions, to try and be a support mechanism, but also know that I had to be the one that take it to the manager. But also understanding the manager was really important, because sometimes there was stuff I had to filter that I knew she wouldn't receive if I said it in a certain way. So knowing her personality and knowing, right, okay, maybe I need to make her think this is her idea, or maybe I need to say it in this way so that I get more buy-in. And then what the manager feeds back to me, filtering what I think will help the players in that moment. Not lying, not hiding anything, but going, right, how would this best be received in this moment if I feed this back? So incredible experience. The privilege of my career was walking out of Wembley in front of 72,000 screaming Team GB fans, and I never even dared to dream I'd play at Wembley. You know, so to be there as an Olympian was absolutely incredible. But I kind of remember walking out the tunnel that night, and as the crowd went mad, I remember all my hairs on my body standing up.
I'm getting it now.
It's just incredible. But I just thought, do you know what? You kind of go back to everything I've done's put me here. It's not chance. Yes, there's opportunity. I'm massive on opportunity and taking the opportunities that come your way. But I've worked hard for this. And the best leader I can be right now is play my game and make sure I'm at the top of my game and support the players around me, and make sure that we've got really clear communication lines on the pitch, really clear communication lines off the pitch too. And we didn't have we didn't have a sports psych at that point. So I'd learned a lot of exercises from the previous sports psych that we'd worked with. So we used to do quite a bit off the grass as a team to keep us connected. But it's in those tough moments when you're 2-0 down against Canada, and you know you're going out the tournament, and as a captain you feel completely and utterly responsible, but kind of helpless at the same time, because there's not an awful lot you can do to change the game as a centre back. All you can do is keep urging your team forward, trying to change things tactically within your power, obviously not overpowering the manager. But you take responsibility in those moments. And I always did. When we bombed out in 2013, I took responsibility because I'm the captain of the team. I'm the first one to the mic and the interviews. And and it always hurts. I didn't actually, 2012 hurt me so much, I didn't even go back in the village. I missed Super Saturday, which I'm reminded about all the time because I got in the car, drove to France and didn't watch the Olympics for the rest of the time, which is devastating, but it was what I needed to do. I couldn't get myself back in a good space, and I needed to do that because we were playing our first league game 4 weeks later.
Okay, so I'm absolutely fascinated by how thoroughly you take on that responsibility, because I think, again, anyone listening in, of course it doesn't lie on you when a team does. I know I was in a team sport, it never just relies on the captain, but I can also understand from being in your shoes how it makes you feel. Something I am really interested to hear, and if I can just say as an aside, Casey, if football management doesn't work out for you, please can you go and coach every international captain in every sport for Great Britain, because I think we would do significantly, we would have some enormous improvement. Something I really struggled as a captain, as I said, I really wish I'd had this conversation earlier. How did you deal with difficult conversations? Again, I'm sure everybody tuning in, we sometimes have to have conversations with colleagues and with our boss. Perhaps it's leading people, and they are hard. And you often have, we all do, there's always characters where you have to potentially lead a bit more differently into that conversation. Can you just bring that to life? How did you deal with those?
They're called difficult for a reason, and no one likes them. But the worst thing you can do, I think, as a leader is avoid them. I remember being in some of those moments, and there's kind of two things I'd always go with. First, I'd go with empathy. What are they feeling? What shoes are they standing in right now? Because they're not in mine. They might not, I'm playing, they're not playing straight away. So there's that emotion involved. Okay, what kind of relationship have they got with the manager? There are certain players you have to know them. You know what we did all of our backstories. So we knew where people would come from. We knew their backgrounds, their adversities, and what had shaped them. So when they behave a certain way, you shouldn't be surprised, because you know where they've come from, you know what shaped them. Some people can, and some people are very difficult. And when they're difficult, I think it's easy to avoid them and step away. It's a lot harder to take them head on. But I believe in that. But I also think if you go with empathy but honesty, don't lie to them. Don't try and tell them something they want to hear, because you're not helping the manager in that moment. You're not helping the team. There's nothing worse than a player coming off who hasn't started and then go, oh, you should have played. Well, no, you didn't. We won. You shouldn't have played. It was the manager's decision. And also, it's not my opinion to go there and say that. I'll say, listen, it's the manager's decision. What can you now do in terms of trying to get back in the team? How can I support you in those moments? Okay. And I'd almost encourage them to do an action plan in those moments, to say, right, okay, what can I control in training? How can I contribute in meetings? When I get frustrated, what do I need? Right, okay, right, let's go for a walk then. Me and you, let's go for a walk, and you can just put it on me. You know, I remember keeping a diary during 2015, and I was taking players for walks left, right, and centre. They weren't playing. But I felt that was because I wasn't playing as much. I was like, this is kind of my responsibility now. If I can make a difference, because I always say you're only ever as good as your bench. Different in hockey, because you can roll on, roll off. There's not as much emotion. Whereas if you don't get on in the first 3 subs, you're not getting on. So you could spend the whole tournament not playing. So their emotions become important. But then I don't think it's fair to put that on the manager, because I don't think you should, that the manager's got to focus on performance in games. So I would take them for a walk and say, just let them. Sometimes it's just listening, but also at the right times challenging their thought process to say, well, hold on a minute, have you thought about it this way? Have you come from where the manager's seeing it? But what can you now do? And it's not easy. As a head coach, I have to have difficult conversations all the time. Honesty is key, but also having an understanding of what they're coming from and how you can meet their needs in those moments.
Isn't it interesting that probably those conversations you've had to have as player, as captain, have, I imagine, enormously shaped how you now deal with them as a manager? I think it's so key when you talk around empathy. How often are we, you know I did it perhaps in my role sometimes as well. You step in with your own thoughts without stepping back to think and ask why. Okay, why have you behaved this way? And that leads me on to my next question, Casey. I know that you were the absolute professional. You led by example. You did the right things. You worked incredibly hard. What do you do when you work in a team, whatever that team may be, and it's not the same for everybody? You know that there's a player or two that perhaps are not living up to the team values, doing what's needed or required of them. How do you manage that? Well, first of all, as a player, and then I'm really interested, is that the same or is that different now that you're a coach?
Yeah, it is different as a coach and as a player. Firstly, it blows my mind because I don't understand it, because I've always been one way of working. But I'm reminded all the time by my partner, not everyone's like you. Not everyone's like you. And that brings me back down to earth a little bit, and in terms of understanding. I think my first thing would be to try and get them to follow me,
Mhm.
and persuade and influence rather than challenge. Can I influence them in the right direction? Can I ask questions as to why they're not? Can I find out what's stopping them? What's the barriers? What's the hurdles? Why are they going against team culture or environmental behaviors? Like what if, can I get to the nitty-gritty of that first before I start saying you're out of order? Because you don't know what's going on. There could be something going on in the background. There could be problems in the personal life. It could be absolutely anything. And I don't know. So I should never go in with a bias or a confirmation that of the way I think, because our lives have been different. Our experience is different. They're coming from a different place. So find out why, and then I would try and persuade and influence. And then I think there comes a time when, if you can't change the people, you change the people. Simple. Like, you can try and try and try, but some people aren't. They're not going to change. So in that moment, they might be better off not being there for the sake of the team. And as a head coach, I will give people 10 lives to some degree, and I'll work through them with that, like what's going on. Also understanding I had a young player who's super talented, but didn't have the work rate that I had. They had way more ability than me, but I didn't understand. So I've gone away and researched and did some work with changing minds. The frontal lobe isn't even developed in terms of decision making at a young age. So when she's reacting a certain way, her emotional brain's thinking more than logical, because it's not developed. So I didn't know that as a coach. So I'm like, right, okay, I'll give her a little bit more time. But then there's non-negotiables as well within that. You can go so far, and then there's a line. I've left players out day before games. I've left players at home out of squads because they haven't done the right things. I've fined players, but then my standards are set from day one. They know what my non-negotiables are. They know what my expectations are. I'm very clear. I do not deviate, and I won't slack, because the one day I slack, it tells everybody that's okay. But in those challenging times, because I've built those relationships with those people and I've spent time in one-to-ones and I understand their family backgrounds, I can go and say, hey, that's not okay. What we're going to do about it? And I can have challenging conversations, and I'll be very, very honest in those moments. But then I'll support them. Right, okay, I've had this challenging conversation. In 2 days' time, we're going to have another one-to-one, and we're going to work out how we can work through this. So you don't just leave them, with it. You got to help, especially young people today, because there's a little bit of entitlement, if I'm honest. They expect everything now rather than working for it and waiting for it, because that's the nature of the lives we live now. But yeah, it's not easy, but at the same time, it's necessary.
Yeah, I'm really clearly hearing kind of the relationship driven, when you're making these decisions, it has to be individual to the person, but consistency is key. I mean, how true is that about everything we do? And then the support after those decisions are made or challenges are made around behavior, that support is critical. And I mean, it sounds like you have it perfectly done to a T there, Casey.
I also think, Alex, if they're not going to change, then they're not for me as a head coach. This is the way I work. If it's not going to work for you here, then you're probably better off going somewhere else. I think there's another point to it as well. Is sometimes I get it wrong, and I hold my hand up and I go, listen, I got that one wrong. I'm really sorry. How would you have liked me to have dealt with that differently? So I gain understanding straight away, and I've got humility then. And I'm going, do you know what? I'm human. I got it wrong. I apologize. Tell me how I could have done that better for you. And I
was
think
just about to say, Casey, your example to us about being human is exemplary. We can't always get it right, but actually, if we're able to stand up and say, okay, let's learn, then my goodness, I mean, that is something for us all to look up to and aspire to be. Casey, a really common topic as we move through your career to retirement and to transition. I believe you absolutely thrived in the pressure of performing as an athlete. You learned that there's skills to it. It doesn't just happen. It's working hard. It's having a team of people around you. It's sticking at it when others don't. How was that for you when you moved out of your playing career? I know you very quickly stepped into your role with the Lionesses. How did you manage that change? How did you find the pressures differed from a player to a manager?
Yeah, obviously the transition element was terrifying, if I'm honest, because you go from being, obviously I always had a job, but later on in my career I was full-time professional. So you go from thinking, oh, I'm going to lose my career, lose my income overnight. I've got a family to feed. What am I going to do? And your identity is all wrapped up in your football as well, which is something that, you know, I would work with players on, making sure you've got a bigger identity than just your sport. So when I stepped into work with Phil, obviously I turned up to one camp in one colour tracksuit, and then I turned up into the next camp in a different colour tracksuit. But I think the biggest thing I could say is the players actually said to me, like, it's like you've always done this. And I took that as a huge compliment. It was just a natural transition, and I became a bit of a conduit for Phil between the players. And obviously he hadn't known women's football at all at that point, so being that support mechanism for, I've been in the team 18 years, how can I support you to do your job as a number two, but also support the players? And I wasn't there for long. I was only there for a few months. Obviously I got the opportunity at Manchester United, and then I was then hiring players that I'd played with, and that was a big transition for me, to make sure that the boundaries were laid very firm and clear in the sand, so that they knew. And I made a really conscious decision on match days to never wear a tracksuit. I either wear a suit or I am smart casual, and that was a real clear decision around, I need them to see me as a head coach, and match day is really important in terms of that identity for me. So that was a decision. Also setting out my non-negotiables, my clear expectations. I think players knew me, and I think because I'd always been a leader, I think people always viewed me in that way. The big difference between playing and management can be seriously lonely. It's a very lonely place. I don't like to take credit when we do things well. I take all of the responsibility when things go wrong. And it can be an extremely lonely place, and you can fight battles no one knows. But at the same time, I absolutely thrive in it, and I love it. Like you say, I think I'm better when my back's against the wall. I love the pressure. I love game day. I love preparing a team to win. And then if we don't, going over it for 5 days afterwards and reviewing maybe what I did in prep or what I could have done differently. Could I have made any changes? Because I just want to learn and constantly learn. Like, I think I went to school at the wrong time. I didn't want to learn then. Now I'm older.
I'm the same.
I just want to learn. I want to know so much. And also, I am really driven to be the best I can possibly be. And that drives me on.
I think it's so interesting. You had some really clever ways of really differentiating between your role as a player and a coach, and that can be really difficult when the transition is enormous, but you're in the same environment. So it's very subtle. Like, how do I now work with players? How do I now work with management staff? Casey, you alluded to the fact you moved quite quickly to Manchester United. Your talent was taken away quite quickly as you went to the first Women's Super League team. Now, you had some fabulous success in your first season. You were promoted at your first go. Tell me, how much of that was down to raw talent within your team, and how much of that, and I guess it's a kind of leading question, how much of that was around the culture you created and those values you instilled within your squad?
I believe it's all culture. You can have talent, but the talent has to want to work hard. The talent doesn't work hard, it doesn't pay off, you know. And giving players belief, making an environment that was safe and fun, but challenging and supportive. And I worked my way through that. It wasn't until about 6 months in when I actually got a wellbeing coach, consultant in, who wasn't employed by the club. Because I was like, do you know what? There's a lot of emotions going on for these girls. I'm a manager that makes subs at half time. You're not doing it off, next one on. I just see it as part of the process. Whereas they're like, and I'm really honest when I'm critiquing, I'm giving feedback, I'm doing analysis. I'm just saying what I'm seeing. They're not used to that. So I had to develop a way for me of making sure they had a support, but also they need that. Man United's a big club with big eyes on you and big expectations. And I wanted to make sure they had a space that they could feel safe. Also, my wellbeing coach worked with me as a head coach to make sure that I had a space, to make sure that I was always on messaging, to make sure that I was accountable, to make sure that I was leading my staff in the right way, but also for my staff as well. So my staff had a place to go. But it's not crisis management. She helped me control, run, develop the environment that we had, the messaging that we sent, the standards that we set. And she was vital for me as a sounding board. Sometimes you just need a space where you can go and vent, and you can't take that. You don't want your staff to take that negativity in your environment. So that was my space. Or I might go, right, listen, I'm thinking about a workshop this week. Let's talk it over. Okay, we're talking about resilience. We're talking about selflessness. We're talking about our game changers. How do we make our game changers always feel valued? So when you're working for a long season, those players that don't play as many minutes, how do they always feel valued and developing and making sure that they're part of the group? And You know, when you're so busy as a head coach, in that first year, I was an analyst, I was a head coach, I was everything. My number 2 left after 3 months, and I was on my own for a little while. So it was chaotic, but the best and biggest learning curve I could have had. Made loads of mistakes, held my hand up every time. Also, really involved my players, because they're in the dressing room, they're feeling it. I don't want to be in the dressing room. It's not, that's gone, you know. But actually, letting them have a say in their structure, their environment, how they want it to look, because then they own it. Then they've got buy-in. Then it's theirs. Then they're accountable too in terms of responsibility. And I had a leadership group voted for by them, 5 players, and I met with them every single week religiously. But they could come to me at any point. And I didn't have an office, unfortunately, so they could always come to me. I couldn't even shut the door. But I like that, because I'm like, right, I've got ears to the ground then. I know I'm got my finger on the pulse. And you know what? If it's not right, I'll change it. I don't have an ego. That's my biggest non-negotiable, is if you've got an ego, leave it at the door, because I'm not interested. We're all here for the same purpose and the same vision, and we want to go where we want to go. We've got different motivations, absolutely. But I'm like, no, leave your ego. I haven't got an ego. So I'm like, right, tell me. If I can change it, I'll change it. If it's what's right for you and it'll work and it'll make us better, let's do it. Feedback has to be two-way. So when they give me feedback, I have to make sure I action it. Otherwise, it's just going to stop giving it. And then you're not getting honesty from your players anyway. So whilst I'm still working my way, I want to be a better coach, absolutely. I want to be a better manager. I think you learn by doing.
I mean, I love so much of what you've just said in there, Casey. Something that's just stuck out is, how do you make your game changers feel valued? Your players that aren't always on the bench, on the pitch for 90 minutes. How refreshing is that to hear? Because in every scenario in life, we have the goal scorers, the goal savers. I know I'm speaking metaphorically here now. You sit in an office and some people will see and some people don't, but every single member of the team is so valuable. And actually the greatest teams, which, you know, you are part of creating, Casey, are the ones that are able to harness that. It's just so fabulous to hear. Casey, you are quite an incredible individual. I'm loving our conversation. I read something when I was doing some research before our conversation that just really wowed me, because to take responsibility as a coach, I've not always experienced that within my professional career. You finished 4th in your 2 Super Leagues. You know, an incredible position given the amount of time you've been in that league. But I am fascinated by this comment. You didn't qualify for the Champions League on the last occasion, and you very openly said you considered that as a personal failure as the head coach. Now, I bring that up. Firstly, you can't always believe what you say in the press, but having had the conversation with you, I can see that it's something you may say. It's so refreshing to hear a leader take responsibility. But can you just bring that to life a bit? Why is it that you're very happy to have those conversations, to say those things very, very publicly in your sport, when many others perhaps wouldn't?
Main reason, I'm the leader of the team. All the staff are there because of me. All the players are there because of me. The results are driven because of me. So it's my failure. I see it very much that way. I'm the leader, so I take this failure. It's never on anybody else. It's on me. And the reason I believe in taking responsibility is because, how do I expect my players to take responsibility when they maybe fall short? How do I expect my staff to take responsibility and accountability if the leader doesn't do that themselves? You always have to write. And I believed it. I absolutely believed it. It wasn't me just talking to the media. I believed it. I felt a personal failure in that moment. I've looked back on the games and like, if I hadn't done that, if I'd made that change, what could I have done differently there? Obviously, we had a lot of challenges. There was a lot of reasons as well. I won't make them excuses. We had a lot of injuries, a lot of changes within training facilities, etc. That's not an excuse. We don't make excuses. You make the best of what you've got. And I thought I could have done more, and not in terms of work, definitely not, but maybe slightly different decisions. And I'm the leader. It's, I always kind of thought it was my baby. I built it from scratch. So everybody was hired there because I wanted them there. So if we failed because of me again, but I'll always fail my way. I don't regret anything I did. I'll always look back and learn. But I don't think, how can you ask other people to take responsibility if you're not willing to do it yourself?
Casey, I think your openness and your honesty must influence your players and your staff so enormously to just want to be with you all the time. Goodness, I want to be in your management team and I know nothing about football. Casey, I know everyone will be fascinating listening in. Everybody, as I said, are leaders within their own right. As a leading football player, as a leading captain, and as a leading manager, this is an impossible question. I always hate it when I get asked it, but it's an important one. If there were probably 2 or 3 bits of advice that you would give to anybody listening in who are fulfilling a leadership role, what is it that you would say?
Learn about yourself first. Learn about what your needs are. Learn about how you lead. What are your values? Because sometimes it'll be something small that someone does that goes against your values that ends up making you make a decision as a leader you might not make. But if you're not aware of your values, you're aware of yourself, you're aware of what really annoys you and niggles you, what maybe you've got biases towards, because we've all got confirmation bias based on our experiences and where we've been. What are my biases? So I've got a massive bias towards hard work. So players that work hard, brilliant, super talented but lazy, okay, I need to work more with that one. Rather than just going, you're not for me, how do I work more and understand more about that player and that person, most importantly? So know yourself, know your people. Massive. Relationships are huge. Know your people, know where they've come from, know their family, know their backgrounds. Ask them to do their backstories. Show your backstory, show vulnerability to them, and they'll show vulnerability to you. Work with honesty. Always be honest, because you can always support people through it. I always think you tell a lie now, you can pay for it in 6 months' time. Be honest now, it hurt for a second, and then you can move on. And work with humility, because we all make mistakes and we all get things wrong. And if we want accountability and responsibility, we have to be able to show that ourselves.
Casey, this is absolute gold dust. I wish I could talk to you all day. We're coming towards the end of our session, and I know a huge congratulations because you have a fabulous new role in the American Soccer League with San Diego. Casey, just quickly before we head off, please tell us what excites you. What was your reason for your move? What potentially are the pressures that you might have going over there?
I think obviously the biggest challenge for me, it's a new league, new way, draft systems, expansion drafts, international caps. So as a head coach, it's going to be very different. The league's very different. It's very fast and furious. As a coach, the pitcher moves quicker. So, as a coach, I'm definitely going to develop there. I think one of the key selling points is they are going to build a world-class training facility for the women only. And I've never had that as a player. I never had it as a head coach. So for me, it would be an absolute godsend to be able to take my players into a high-performance training environment, to our schedules, to do what we want, and produce a world-class team, with a world-class environment. Because I don't think you have to win ugly all the time. I think you can win in a really good competitive environment. It has to be challenging, absolutely. And it won't be a challenge being in the sun every day. That's for sure.
I can completely understand. I used to absolutely love playing abroad. Casey, we've come to the end of our session. It has been absolutely incredible speaking with you. I have taken down so many notes, and I know I'm supposed to be facilitating, but I'm going to go away from here. I'm going to read some of them out, some of the bits I've popped down. Some of the things that I remember from this session: you're only ever as good as your bench. How valuable is that for us all to remember? Influence rather than challenge. Standards are set from day one. You are huge on relationships. Clearly, the way you work with people, it influences, it inspires. Your working hard ethic, either we either stick with it or we go home. Sleeves up, give everything and don't look back, have absolutely no regrets. I love the time that we talked about working with others, working with your teammates, working with your colleagues, experience, perspective, balance, when pressure sometimes feels too much to us, looking back at what we believe in and where we want to go. And the last thing that you said, Casey, for all of us listening in, as leaders, as family members, as people aspiring to go forward in whatever we may want to do, learn about how you want to lead. What do you need? And what are your values? And lastly, Casey, this is going to stick with me. Let's all always work with some humility. As I said, Casey, it's been an absolute privilege to share this hour with you. Thank you for giving us your expertise and everything that we've learned from you. My pleasure. And to everybody listening and at home, thank you very much for joining us. Please listen out for when our next series will be up. And our August Wellbeing programme is in the events section in the handout. So please feel free to head over to there and have a look to see what is coming up. Again, from me to you, Casey, you're an absolute superstar. We wish you all the best in San Diego.
Cheers, Alex. See you soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.